Hi, this is Maria Quattrone, and this is the Be the Solution podcast. And today I welcome my guest, Jimmy Maransky. He has been somebody I have looked up to and have been really admire his success over the last, probably known him close to 20 years now. But James is the principal of eBuilt LLC, a real estate developer, construction manager, real estate broker, and certified green roof professional. He specializes in multifamily development, restoration of historic buildings, and LEED certified construction, also green roof installation. eBuilt's mission is to promote neighborhood redevelopment by building high quality housing with an environmental conscious. Most notably, eBuilt's projects include the Ice House development, a LEED Platinum 35-unit multifamily development in the Fishtown section of Philadelphia. The Ice House had the distinction of becoming the first LEED Platinum multifamily low-rise project in Philadelphia history. Jim's team led the project through all the stages of the development process, including site selection, acquisition, design, zoning approvals, entitlements, financing, construction, LEED certification, and marketing. Most recently, eBuilt completed the historic restoration of the Gotham project, a 163-unit multi-phase mixed-use multifamily project in the Norris Square, Kensington section of Philadelphia. The Gotham was a renovation of a 10-story, 100-year-old silk stocking factory. The Gotham was honored with the Preservation Alliance Grand Jury Award for Historic Renovation in 2022. In 2024, eBuilt completed their Firehouse project, which was a 30-unit historic renovation of a John T. Windrum firehouse that was built in 1897. eBuilt is also responsible for the installation of over 300,000 square feet of roof in the city of Philadelphia. The design and build of the green roof and project-wide stormwater management system at Wharton Street Lofts won a PWD Excellence Award. Jim received a Bachelor of Science from Albright College, where he was captain of the football team and named an NCAA All-American, setting the all-time NCAA Division III record for receiving tight ends. Jim went to earn his MBA from Villanova University in finance and entrepreneurial real estate, which he earned a full scholarship as a graduate research assistant. Prior to working in real estate, he worked as an energy consultant, completing best-case scenario and analysis for the operation of power plants and analyzing bulk power marketing deals. Jim began working in real estate in 2003, starting with residential rehabs and the acquisition of investment properties. He quickly parlayed his early success into land and building acquisitions for larger scale development. The integration of LEED certification came as a natural fit due to his already existing professional emphasis on finding energy efficiencies. Jim has been a long-term member of the Building Industry Association of Philadelphia Board of Directors. He serves as the chair of BIA's Green Committee and went on to be the vice president of BIA from 16 to 17 and BIA's president for the 2018-19 term. Jim has also been active in philanthropic activities, including sitting on the board of directors for the Hamels Foundation and Urban Roots MTWB, whose missions are to create change through the improvement of childhood education and recreational spaces. eBuilt designed and constructed a state-of-the-art playground for the Hamels Foundation at Bayard Elementary School in North Philadelphia in 2012. In 2015, eBuilt helped fundraise, design, and construct the new playground for Jackson Elementary in South Philadelphia. In his personal life, Jim is happily married to his wife, Nadia, and the proud father of 3 with sons Luke and Cole and daughter Eva. Jim, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome. Jim Maransky, I am so excited to be talking to you today, Jimmy. So much going on.
I know. Nice to see you, Maria.
Oh, great to see you as always. You know, I don't know if you remember this, but I've known you back since the old Gotham days. of the nightclub business.
Yeah,
I was
way
a
back
guest. How many years was that?
when. It's got to be 20, right? 20 plus, 30 probably, 30 years.
30 years. Yes, it's definitely closer to 30 years
Yeah,
because I just celebrated in March 20 years in real estate, and that was way, way before real estate time.
that's right.
Yes. So it's interesting how paths cross and reconnect, and you can never connect the dots forward, only backwards
Right.
of
Yes, agreed.
life, and how one thing led to another. So you're in this nightclub business, and here you are today in major development in Philadelphia. So let's take everybody through that journey,
Yeah.
starting back then.
Okay. I got out of undergraduate and so I'll give you the shorter story. I got out of undergraduate and things weren't great then with the economy, and starting salaries, I was a finance degree, and starting salaries were nothing, right? I could make more doing, just odd jobs and
Anything
side
else?
jobs and bouncing and doing whatever than I could at a professional job. I think my take home pay for my professional job at the time was, probably half of what I needed to cover my bills every month. So, and I got a job working for an electric utility down the shore for Atlantic Electric as an interchange analyst. So I bought and sold electric through this power pool, and I did best case scenario analysis on how to run power plants, right? And that later fed into my desire to do energy efficient projects, right? But I think it was my second day on the job when I came to the epiphany that there's no way I could sit in a cubicle and have a 9-to-5 job. And so, my second day in, I was already looking for the doorway out. And I went
That was
back.
a quick decision.
Right. It was real quick. I knew right away. But, it didn't immediately turn. I made the decision, but then it took me a year or so to start getting myself on the right track. I applied to go back to grad school. I got myself into Villanova for my MBA. And, that position at Atlantic Electric, I was actually a long-term sub for somebody that was on maternity leave, right? So when the woman came back, the position was over, but I had built a good relationship with my supervisor there, and we agreed that they could call me back on a consultant basis whenever they needed. And so, that's kind of the way things work. So I went back to grad school, and when I was in grad school, I wrote a paper for a MIS, a Management Information Systems class. This was right when we're going way back to when the start of the internet, right?
Right.
And start of automation and downloading, and we were changing from a society and a professional society of manually entering data into downloads, and the world was getting more
Late 90s.
These were in the 90s. Yes, this was mid 90s, and so I went back to grad school. I wrote this paper and turned it in. I got an A on it. The professor called me after class, said, "You have and the paper was about how I would improve my job at Atlantic Electric. And the professor said, "You got some really great ideas here. You should try to pitch these to your supervisor." And I said, "Well, I don't work there anymore. I was a full-time student, but the assignment was to write about your job. And this was the last one I had. So I wrote it." He's like, "Oh, we still have some valid points here. You might be able to do something with it." And the electric company the whole industry was going through deregulation, right? So it was the first time where you could start to buy your power from anyone, right? You didn't have to go to your local utility, the same way they did with telephone and all these other industries. They started the deregulation of electric utilities, right? And the open market. So they were looking for cost-cutting measures. So I took this paper and turned it in a proposal, and long story short, I convinced them to outsource the entire department to me as an independent contractor. So there was a supervisor and 5 employees, and that was their cost to run this department. I said, "Okay, I'll do it for about 75% or for the cost of 4 employees." and it took some negotiation, but we got it done, and they outsourced the department to me. So I hired my roommate at the time, and we came in and we reworked the systems, and in a couple months we had it running extremely well, and to the point where my roommate had to work about 40 hours a week, but I was working 5 to 10 hours a week, right? So, and my take-home pay was now 30 times what my take-home pay was when I was an employee. So I started to make my first money in my life and started to do well. And I was making money and spending money, making money and spending money. And I was, enjoying myself, but I wasn't making any real financial forward progress. So I decided to go get my real estate license and start picking up investment properties. So it started with single families and then grew to triplexes and quadplexes. And then I started buying property. I started buying up all the property in Fishtown that eventually turned into the Ice House. But I bought that corner at Thompson and Columbia, and then for the next 3 years, just continued to add on parcels. And I did an assemblage of about 17 properties there. And then it went over on the Moyer Street. So that really catapulted me from being this little bitty investor doing singles and small multis into like a real developer. So
that was a lot of patience to assemble all those parcels.
Yeah, it was a rough road, and I was young and I was naive and I didn't have the experience I needed. It was basically, trial by fire, right? But I figured out a path through. And
20 years ago.
Yeah, and that was 2004, 2005 that I was really like putting together all those pieces of Fishtown. That's before Fishtown was anything, right?
That's right.
I had a long-term boss that I worked for when I was going through graduate school who said that he would invest in anything I did. And then I came to him with this stuff in Fishtown, and he said, "You're nuts. I'll never give you a dime to go into Fishtown. They're crazy over there. That market's never going to turn." And I really thought that it would, and it turned a lot faster than even I thought it would.
Look how much faster Fishtown turned than Northern Liberties did.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Northern Liberties.
I lived on 4th Street in Northern Liberties as my first apartment in Philadelphia. It was a single family at 929 North 4th, and it was a little crazy then. It was not very safe. It was it was not a place where young people were living, and it took Northern Liberties that whole time. What would it take Northern Liberties? 10, 15 years to turn. But Fishtown, as soon as it started,
I feel like
started. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I feel like Northern Liberties was like 25 years.
Yeah, it took a long time. But then they did the Schmitz Brewery and the Piazza came up, and that became like the hub of Northern Liberties is what it really needed. And then it started to build out both sides from there. And then from like 2007 to, for the next 10 years, Fishtown just exploded, right? I mean, back then in 2004, 2005, Johnny and Brenda's was like the only place in Fishtown, right? Now you have, 4 or 5 restaurants that are considered top 10 in Philadelphia, and some that are, top 5, voted in on the East Coast. So
I think Fishtown has a high per capita amount of restaurants per person.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot I haven't been to over there. Just, a little more challenging to get over there and park and all that. So, people that are on this side of the city tend to stay more on this side of the city, although I go everywhere. But there's a lot of restaurants I still want to check out. I heard that they just updated the menu at Sin.
Yep. Yeah.
I heard that's supposed to be better.
Soraya, LML, Mulheron's.
Yeah, I've been to all those.
Yeah. I mean, it's great.
Taco, Steven Sarr's place. What's that?
Yeah, LMNO.
LMNO.
Yes.
I love that place.
Yes, very good.
It's very good. It's very good.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy, and it's a real story. It's a success story for a neighborhood that needed residential density, right? For Frankfurt Avenue, the main corridor, to be built out and to become a real commercial corridor, you needed the residential density. And that's what that 10 years from like '05 to 2015, the residential density in Fishtown just exploded, right? And you get all these people that are against density, they're against infill housing, they're against the development, anti-development, but they want the restaurants, they want the commercial spaces, and they want, it's pie in the sky without the residential density. It's everything. You have
you
to
need
put
the
the people, you need people in seats, right? And now you have Frankfurt Avenue that back then in '05, you could have bought, you could have leased any commercial space on Frankfurt Avenue for, $1 a square foot, right? And that would have been a high rent back then. Now you have, these amazing restaurants going in, paying high dollar rents and really drawing people. And it's become a real commercial corridor.
Yeah, it certainly has. I think La Colombe putting their stake in the ground there was a huge turn for Fishtown.
Yeah. And it's not just Fishtown, Passyunk Square, right? The same thing. Passyunk Avenue is always a great corridor, but
always. I've been a neighborhood for 100 years.
Yeah, but the residential density there and all the development really helped the restaurants. And
now there's 40 restaurants probably.
Yeah.
We were literally just there last night after our event.
The question is, where's next, right? What's next?
What is next?
You got me. I don't know. We'll see. It's continuing, just like Fishtown, the 19122 zip code, Old Kensington, New Kensington, North Square, and Kensington. Back when I was buying up Fishtown, I had no faith in the 19122. I thought it was too much available land. I didn't think it would ever move that quickly. I didn't think it would ever fill in the way it did, and it really surprised me. And then, our Gotham project, kind of became, that epicenter of the 19122, the way that the Piazza did for Northern Liberties, right? When we did Gotham, there was really nothing within, a square mile radius of development. And as soon as we started doing Gotham, and when I first came to tour Gotham, we're on the 2000 block in North 2nd Street. When I first came to tour it, I came from Girard Avenue and I came up American. And this was before the American Street revitalization project and the new LED streetlights and the cleanup and the center gardens and everything else. American Street looked like a war zone, right? It was rough. And, I drove up from Girard and I came to visit Gotham the first time I came for a showing. And I was like, yeah, it's unbelievable building, like this 10-story, 150-foot high building with a water tower. Like you don't see this anywhere, but it's just too far north. And I literally left saying, what a shame, what a great building, but just too far north. And it was actually like a week later, I had basically mentally written it off. And I was at a grand opening for a Jeff Tubbs project on Frankfurt Avenue. And it had a rooftop happy hour. And I walked up onto the rooftop, and this was on the 2000 block of Frankfurt Avenue. And I walked up there and I turned around and the Gotham building almost punched me in the face. It was so close. And I didn't realize, because I had come up American so far north, I didn't realize that it was only like a block or two out of Fishtown coming west. And when I saw that, I had an instant pit in my stomach, like I need to leave and this party and go call this broker and get another look at this Gotham project. And then got on my horse and got real serious about it and was able to get the project under agreement. Now, here we are. That was 2016. So now here we are 8 years later, and we have 100 and, first 3 phases are done and we're in construction. You can see the scaffold and the ropes swinging behind me on the north phase. So the first phase of Gotham was 96 apartments, and then it was 18 new construction apartments, the corner coffee shop, 12 townhomes, and now we're on the north parcel, which is 45 more apartments. So, and now you see development. I look down 2nd Street, right, from us on the north point of 2nd Street to the Piazza, there's projects on every corner the whole way down, right? And I must have received 100 calls from appraisers over the last 8 years, comping Gotham for every project that was coming out. So Gotham was big enough, and we were able to do well enough to put a stake in the ground and really become that center point here in the 22 zip code, and then all these projects up and down 2nd Street. And now they branch over. Now you have them on American. Front was always developing, but that's another corridor that really has just grown unbelievably, especially considering it's under the L, right? And it takes a certain person to live,
So
right next to the L.
What I say about that is that if you're not from Philadelphia, you don't care about living under the L.
Right.
A lot of the people that moved under the L, from my research, were from other cities.
Okay. I mean, it's certainly convenient.
It's convenient, but there's a stigma. It's a stigma. Like there's certain prejudices, so to speak, Philadelphians have about certain things. And one of them is being under the L.
That's right.
People didn't like it. So you have to go outside. But I said, and look for people that don't have a prejudice against the L. There's always prejudice around everywhere we look.
That's right. It's
in every shape and form. But you put you have that project that is such a huge success, and now you're on the 4th phase. Do you have major concerns about all the development that's happening in the Fishtown, Northern Liberties, Delaware Avenue corridor?
Concerns. I'm intrigued to see what happens, right? I'm not overly concerned. We're, at Gotham, we're average per square foot, in the mid twos, $2.50 a square foot, right? All this new inventory coming out. Like I'm really anxious to see what happens with that whole Spring Garden to Delaware Avenue corridor with all these projects that are coming out. These are all gigantic, major buildings, like curtain wall type buildings they're spending probably close to $400 a foot to build these things. Or large union builds, large companies, Southern Land, National Realty, all these big companies, Durst down on Delaware Avenue. Then you turn on Delaware, go up Delaware Avenue, but from what I'm hearing, all those projects are pro forma with rents that are, $325 to $450 a square foot, right? I'm interested to see what happens just in the context of what's going to happen. Are they going to fill? Who's coming there? Do we have that many people in that, in that market that they're, at $4 a foot, 1,000 square foot unit is $4,000 a month. That's a hefty rent payment for, a young professional. So who's coming to live, right? And
I don't know, but I'm not paying $4,000 a month for 1,000 square feet.
Right. Yeah.
My mortgage actually is less than that,
right.
Personally.
Right.
Well, I paid a lot off, right? So, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and it's a lot of units. It's 2,000 units between. You have the Carson, right, at 6th and Spring Garden. You have the Southern Land project at 5th and Spring Garden. You have the big one at 2nd and Spring Garden. You have Delaware and Spring Garden. And you go down Delaware Avenue, and then you get all the way down even to the Battery, to the power plant down there. These are all high rent.
Okay. Albert Lubert's project.
I'm biased, but if I wanted high rent living like that, I like the access of being on the fringe of the city. I don't, because the only other place you're finding rents like that are Rittenhouse Square, right? Midtown.
Midtown, the Jessup House.
Right.
They're in the high $4s a foot, which is a tremendous amount of money.
Right. Rittenhouse Square is great, right? And you used to go there, like you're in the middle of the city, you're there, but to get in and out of Rittenhouse Square, if you're driving, it's an extra 20 minutes to get into your parking space and into your building, and an extra 20 to 30 minutes to get out of your building and out of your parking space and out of the city, versus these ones on Spring Garden where it has great access in and out of the city, great access to 95, great access to New York, right? If you're going from New York to Philly, if you're going from New York to Delaware and Spring Garden, it's probably a 30-minute shorter commute than going from Delaware into Rittenhouse Square.
Sure.
And going from New York into Rittenhouse Square. So, and now
Rittenhouse has since everything going on has really taken a bit of a hit too.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, you see now, like what we were talking about with Frankfurt Avenue, all these places on Spring Garden, Delaware, they all are walking distance into Northern Liberties, into Fishtown, very easy to get there, very bikeable, so we'll see what happens. It's real. I'm really intrigued because if these places don't fill, it's not like they can drop their rents from $375 to $275. That makes no sense for them, right? And I don't even know how they hit break-even levels at that with what they're costing for construction, right? It's their break-even numbers have to be, $325 a square foot, $350 a square foot. So, how can they drop below those levels? So I'm interested to see, even with incentives, how will they lease up? What will happen? I guess the cream will rise to the top. You would think that the Southern Land project at 5th and Spring Garden, it will probably fill, right? Like that's the creme de la creme, right?
Creme de la creme.
Right, they're gonna probably fill, and then everybody else will trickle down from there. So we'll see.
It'll be interesting. It'll be definitely interesting to see. People ask all the time.
Yeah.
They ask me all the time about it.
But I mean, I'm not panicking. Yeah, I'm not panicking because I know that there's no new starts right now, right? Like,
no.
Almost every project, 90% of projects are getting shelved. You can't afford the interest rates, you can't afford the construction costs. So why would you rush to market with anything now? Why would you be starting a project now unless you had some other thing that's hanging over your head that's requiring you have some other type of, your permits are expiring or your financing, you are locked in and ready to go and you don't want to give it up, but
I see that though, Jim. I was on Girard Ave the other day coming from Center City, and I see steel coming out of the ground right now that wasn't there a month ago.
Yeah, there is some new starts, but listen, a lot of times projects will start with their infrastructure and get their foundations in and get steel in and get
maybe they won't finish,
and then they stop, right?
Yeah.
And they basically get a pad site together, ready to go. That's what
well,
the
maybe that's what they're
down
doing.
on Delaware Avenue, I believe, is what they did, right? They got their pad site ready to go, and now they're ready to go vertical. But I mean, we're still dealing with, seriously escalated construction costs, right? I mean, post-COVID, the cost of construction just went through the roof, and some of it was real, some of it was, opportunists, a lot of subcontractors just raising their prices because they know they can. And when you're in a project, when the project's moving, you don't have much of a choice. You have to complete it. You can't stop mid-span and be like, I'm going to wait these prices out. You have to finish. So that price gouging went on, but now you see a lot of these subcontractors are not busy and they're laying off guys and their pipeline has greatly shrunk. And now instead of giving the response of, hey, yeah, I'm too busy to bid your project, now you get the cold call. What do you have coming up? Right. So, my personal belief is that over the next year, we'll see construction costs come back down. And then probably starting 2025, interest rates, what we thought was going to happen this year with the trickle down of interest rates, I expect that it'll start at the end of the year. And probably by the end of next year, we'll be back to a point where, guys will feel comfortable enough to start building again. But it's almost going to be like a 2-year, gap in the market where that's where you'll see the absorption happen, right?
Yeah.
Is that you have all this inventory come on, projects will sit half full, and then they will until there's no new projects out there for an extended period. Then we'll see the absorption happen, and once the absorption happens, then the market will reopen again, and we'll be back off to the races, hopefully. Knock on wood.
As long as we have more people continuing to move in Philadelphia. Otherwise, we're just having musical chairs.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Yes. I mean, that's essentially what happens, right? Is that, it's critically important that we keep the young professionals that are going to school in Philadelphia. We got to keep them here, right? We got to keep them here with good paying jobs, and we got to keep them here with amenities and
a safe place to live.
That's right, and a safe place to live. We can blame the powers that be for everything, but I don't know about that. I mean, all they can do is try to turn the tide. It's gotten so crazy out there in the world, and it's not a Philadelphia thing. It's
a major
urban
city.
circumstance.
Yes,
now
it's a major city.
Yes,
and globally, in fact.
Yes.
It's not just here in Philadelphia, unfortunately. It's bad, but that's another story for another day. We're talking about, try to stay as positive as possible. Anyway,
That's right.
we can complain from here
That's right.
to the weekend, Jimmy.
Yes.
So I was very fortunate 2 weeks ago to come to the firehouse for the event. Gosh, it built in 1895. It's such a historic building. And I know that there was an RFP out for it when that's how you ended up getting the property.
Yes.
But let's tell our listeners the story of how that came to be.
You know what it's funny is that my architect's office, the architect Continuum Architecture, Judy Robinson, designed my Ice House project. She designed Gotham. She has done a ton of work for me. I've worked with her almost exclusively. Only a few times I've worked with other architects. Judy's done so much work for me. And her office was directly adjacent to the firehouse, right? So the firehouse is 1223. She was 1221. Or I think the firehouse is 1221. She was 1219 North 4th Street. So I would come to her office for years, and every time I'd come there, I'd stand and gawk at that building and be like, I can't believe it was a maintenance hub for the city, right? And so and for years we were trying to spur the city to put that out, and we tried to buy it, we tried to make a move on it, and it finally came up for RFP. And Jeff Tubbs and I were both going to go after it. And Judy living next door, we really felt like we had an inside track on this because she had the building next door and the rear yard that adjoined to the rear yard of the firehouse. And when we designed the project, we basically designed a new construction portion of it around that, magnolia tree in the backyard.
Right.
And, so Jeff and I went on it together, and we put a very intriguing RFP answer out there, and we were blessed enough to be awarded, either because we were lucky or because we were the highest price. I don't know. But we were awarded the RFP. I can't even tell you what year that was, but then everything went into COVID and it hit a snag. And, so it took, I think, almost 3 years for us to close on the property, but we eventually did. And I mean, that was a wild ride through COVID. We broke ground basically right out of COVID, and the project, we had it, under agreement and the sale pending for 3 years. So we had all the legwork done, our estimates in place, all our sub costs, everything. But when COVID hit and all the escalation hit, throw all that out the window, right? Mm-hmm. So it was crazy because we had our podium built out, all spec'd out for the rear. And, I think the cost was $325 for the podium, but concrete and rebar had gone up so much that when we went to pull the trigger on it, it was almost, I think it was $750, right? So the $400,000 increase just in the cost of the podium because of the escalation in concrete and rebar. And it was insane. So we basically started on the rehab portion of the building and just let the podium sit and just kept checking the indexes over time. And about 6 to 9 months later, concrete came back down, rebar came back down. We ended up getting the podium done for about $550, right? So it's still almost a 70% increase, but less than what it was. And it was the same deal when we got the podium done with the lumber. I think our original lumber order was around $200,000, and it had gone up to as high as $500, right? And then we waited and waited and waited for it to come back down. And we were delaying the project, but the front portion was moving, just the new construction portion was not. And, but what could we do? I mean, the last thing, you can't throw money like that out the window. You can't say, we'll throw an extra 300,000 into concrete. We'll throw an extra 300,000 in the framing. That'll lopside your project. It'll take your project down, right? So we eventually got over those hurdles and then got the project built. And, it came out this other side when we're finishing the project that interest rates are at 8.5% now, right? So not a great time to refi, but our lender was working with us and gave us an extension to get us through these times. And so, the project's completed, and we did the ribbon cutting 2 weeks ago. We did the girls did a great job leasing it up. I think we're up to close to 20 of the 30 units occupied. Wow. Without incentives, so that's unbelievable.
Congratulations. That's a huge.
Yeah, we're very happy with the way that it's going. It's, but interest rates are everything to the developer, right? So, it's not a moneymaker until, we need, hopefully in the next 2 years, we'll drop 2 points in an interest rate in the, prime will go down by a couple points, and then we'll be in a great position to do a refi and put our perm loan on it. And
so what do you think they need to be around six points?
Yeah. I think if we can get prime back to 6, it's not what everybody got spoiled with over, those that were lucky to refi during COVID, and post-COVID, they got a one-time blessing, but yeah, I think it's down to 6, because if you're in the 6s for prime, you can get construction loans for multifamily and mixed-use buildings around that same number. And then when you get out and you go do your federally backed, larger loans, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those are typically a point to 2 points below prime, right? Because they work on floating off of SOFR or some other, index. So, like right now you can get a Fannie or Freddie loan in the mid 6s. So it's a 1.5 below prime. So if we get back to that number where we get prime at 6, and we get Freddie and Fannie perms in at 4.5, I think we're back in business, right? So, but now it makes it tough on everybody because lenders are still lending, but they're all doing this back end stress test on their term sheets, right? So they'll basically say to you, okay, we haven't changed our terms. We're still 70% loan to cost, right? As that's what their terms are. But then they do this back end stress test where they say, okay, if the project was finishing today and they had to perm out the project at 7%, what's this look like? Well, nobody's forecasting out a perm loan on their multifamily project at 7%, right? We're all forecasting 4 to 5, right? So, but when they forecasted a perm at 7 to 8, it kills what you can borrow, right? Because you just can't justify the principal of the loan with the interest rate that high. So and that's why you see most of these projects getting shelved is that, you go to do a $10 million project, typically you would need $3 million in equity. But now, because of this back end stress test, you need $5 million in equity. So not many guys are out there jumping and signing up for 50% LTV or LTC projects, right? So that, I think, more than anything, even greater than the interest rate itself, most guys can stomach the interest rate. They can't stomach the amount of equity that has to go into the deal to get the lender to do the project. And I think that's why you're going to see a real halt in starts. We've already seen through the start of 2024, but I think you'll see that through the rest of this year. To me, that would be the primary reason.
Yeah, I don't know what the starts were this year. No, last year, just permits pulled in the city was down like 90%.
Yeah. I mean, that was skewed because it was so high the year before because of everybody trying to get in under the 10-year abatement, right? So the full, and
But it's still low,
right, yeah,
low number.
yeah,
Yeah, I
still
mean,
low.
we see it on the land sale side. We do see though some more people wanting to park some money around, believe it or not,
Yeah,
and a little bit of speculation, but yet to be seen, I guess. There's it's not everybody wants to leave the money in the bank
that's right. So
because if I'm going to hold this for, I don't know, you see all the development on American Street. Who would have thunk 10 years ago American Street would be what it is today?
yeah,
Just a short 10 years.
yeah, a lot can
Nobody
happen.
would.
Yeah, a lot can happen in 10 years, and a little can happen in 10 years, right? It's funny. The old developer saying is, what do they say? Lose a month, lose a year, right? Like if you delay and you're saying, I'm going to take another month to figure this out, like those delays, a month can turn into a year real quick. A year can turn into 3 years.
Mm.
A lot of times you start working on a project and you think, okay, I'm going to be done with this in 3 years, and next thing you know, 7 years later, you're finishing. So, it's not an unusual story.
No, it's not. It's not. So this great news that the firehouse is almost leased up. I know you have some other projects that you're working on.
Yes. So we just acquired the Willow Street steam plant at Ninth and Willow, which is, if you've seen that looks like if you've seen the battery down on Delaware Avenue, that big Pico substation that
Sure.
Rupert Adler redid. So
Yeah.
that was the architect for the firehouse was John T. Windrum. The architect for the Pico power plant, the battery, was John T. Windrum, and now John T. Windrum is also the architect for this Willow Street steam plant that was built in 1920. So it's another big building. We're taking it through the historic nomination process. We got our determination of eligibility. We had our Part 1 passed from the state. We just had our Part 1 passed through the federal, and we have our Part 2 drawings that are being worked on now, and those should be in and approved by middle to end of summer, and then we'll get running on that project as well. So it's a 70,000 square foot existing building that we'll do a historic renovation on. So that will be, I think, my fifth adaptive reuse historic renovation project. So that's kind of the way I've been focusing and the projects I've been looking for, which is people ask why. It's a combination of the uniqueness of the project. Two, tax credits have a lot to do with the financing involved, and I've learned that process, and it is a arduous process, and it's tough. And we have the great pleasure of being our own GCs, which makes it a lot. It's really the only way to do these big existing buildings and adaptive reuse. If you're in a traditional developer third-party GC relationship, you'll get smoked, right? There's every day something new comes up. Every day
change orders
galore, and the only way to really handle that is to manage the project yourself. The third-party GC can do it and will do it. It's just extremely difficult to manage your contingency and your cost overruns. So we build our own projects. So we have, I did a Bell Telephone building up on Widener University campus. Then we did the Gotham project, and we did the Firehouse project, and now we have the steam plant project. We also have a smaller one over on 6th Street called the Pringle Factory that we got approvals for. We had zoning approvals and historic approvals for last year. So that's a smaller project. It's 26 units at 6 and Berks.
So 6 and Berks. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I've been doing, is picking up these large existing buildings and doing these historic rehabs, and which also, it's not by chance that I've been looking for these historic and these existing buildings. One way to counterbalance the high construction costs is to buy existing buildings, right? Foundations are in, main structure is in, right? You're all the way up through. You basically are doing an exterior facade renovation and an interior fit out, right? So you lose a lot of these infrastructure costs that go along with new construction, right? So I'm not doing major excavation. I'm not doing major foundation work. I'm not doing large amount of framing and structural framing. I'm taking an existing building and doing, like we've talked about, a historic renovation to the facade to bring it back to life, and then an interior fit out. So, that's one way to sidestep these high construction costs. Our fit out costs are still high, right? But,
Sure.
it's still, you come out with a very unique building that you could never, ever afford to build new construction.
It's not
Right.
replicatable.
Right.
At all. Plus, I think it's a labor of love too, Jim. I think there's something about, those types of buildings and that type of work that you like. If you're into it, you're into it. Some people want nothing to do with that. They just want to come straight out of the ground with,
Yeah.
cutter kind of thing. Where how do we maximize? But you can be more creative. I mean,
Yes.
there's I don't know, and there's a sellable feature about that when you're selling that to renters. You're going to live in a historic building from 1895.
That's right.
Used to house engine 29. This is what happened there. This is the family story. You can wrap marketing around that quite easily.
Yes.
By telling the story of that building. And they all have a story.
That's right. And you're already differentiated, right? Like, it's so hard in this day and age to differentiate a new construction building, right? Like, what can you possibly do that's not been done? Like, you really have to be super inventive to come up with something, because everybody now, 10 years ago, nobody programmed their rooftop. Now everybody programs their rooftop, right? Everybody's doing decks and green roofs and rooftop pools and amenity spaces on their roofs. 10 years ago, nobody did that. So everybody was differentiating themselves by, we have this great outdoor space. We have this great rooftop space. Look, we have roof decks. We have,
dog runs.
We have dog runs. We have, outdoor kitchens. We have an outdoor movie theater. We have, outdoor fireplaces. We have all these different amenities, but now everybody's doing that. So how do you, it's crazy. It's how do you differentiate yourself, from everyone else? If you're new construction box versus the other new construction box, the historic rehab, you're already differentiated. Some people like it, some people don't. So maybe you do cross out, 30 or 40% of the population that doesn't want to live in a historic rehab. But the goal is that make it look like a historic from the exterior and interior. It looks like new construction, except with exposed brick and a lot of times polished concrete floors. And, you get, like, I'm sitting right now in my office at Gotham, and we have 14-foot ceilings, right? Polished concrete floors, 14-foot ceilings, gigantic expanses of windows, great daylight. That is really hard to replicate in a new construction building.
Totally. Extremely. It's not financially, it doesn't make sense to do it.
Right. Yeah. You can never.
Unless you're building like Schuylkill Yards or something.
Yeah, exactly.
In your Brandywine Realty Trust.
Right. The Gotham building.
They have more money than.
Right. So the Gotham building, to round it off, was 100,000 square feet, and we paid $5.6 million for it in 2018. Right. So if you do that math, right, you come out to $50 a foot for the shell, right, for the building. To build this shell, right, to try to recreate, it would be $150 a foot, right? To a 10-story poured concrete structure with 15-foot ceilings and huge expanses of glass, right? You can never replicate that in today's day and age. When we were at the Firehouse project, they talked about when they built the facade, they spent, I forget what the number was.
Like
to build the whole firehouse was like $56,000. Right now, to try to replicate the facade on the firehouse, right, would be $500,000 project, right, to just do the stonework on the face. So it's, you get stuff, you get something that's, and what, not only is it highly differentiated, it's already lived 100+ years. So you have something that's going to stand the test of time. Yeah. Like our Gotham building celebrated its 100th birthday. It was built in 1921. So last year, 2 years ago, 2022 was the 100 years that it was in existence. We finished it on its 100-year anniversary, but now it's basically refinished. It'll live. This building should live, for another 300 years. Like these new construction wood frame buildings, that nothing wrong with them. I'm not putting them down, but they're not going to have the lifespan of a masonry building, right? It's just, it's
not possible.
Right.
It's not possible. Yeah, I do love the adaptive reuse work. This, and part of the reason why I love it is the stories that are intertwined in it, and so many, like if the walls could talk.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And that's like all marketing. That's all marketing. It's all, I read about some people that, and I was listening to the day that we were there for the ribbon cutting about the people in the firehouse and the stories, and it's really cool. It's like there's, I don't know, work can be fun and cool at the same time.
Yeah.
And just work.
There are great stories. You'll hear the mason that spent 2 years of his life doing the facade, right? Or, in some of these historic buildings that a custom carpenter came over from Europe, from Italy. And I was just touring one the other day, a historic castle. And they said that in the main room where they enter the building in this castle, that a custom carpenter, this came from Italy and came over from Italy, and he spent 1 year of his time doing this one room every day, full time for 1 year to do the trim work and detailing in this castle.
Where's the castle?
Outside of Philadelphia. I can't really say the location, but I can't give it away.
You'll tell me later.
That's right.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. A guilty pleasure.
A guilty pleasure. Boy. Golf trip with friends. Is that a guilty pleasure?
Whatever you want it to be.
I guess it is. I guess if you saw what went on these trips, you would say it's a guilty pleasure. That's a joke.
Golfing with the boys.
Golfing with the boys. I wouldn't say, I think that would be it.
That's it. Okay.
What else?
The other question I have, what are you most excited about the future?
Most excited about for the future? I guess that would be a personal thing, not a professional thing. I don't know if you want a personal answer or a professional answer.
However you want to answer.
Personally, watching my kids grow up, watching my kids play sports. My oldest son thinks he's on a path to Division I basketball, watching him work and try to achieve his goals and watching his development, watching them succeed, watching them fail, it's a roller coaster of emotions, and it's one of the pleasures of my life. So, I'm excited for that, for the future.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And they're so big now.
Right. Yeah. So when I was a young developer,
I knew you didn't have any kids.
That's right. And I didn't have any money either. So when I was that young developer, that pie-eyed guy looking, I said, one day I'm going to build a real estate empire, and that my goal is that by the time my kids hit college, I'll be able to have a private jet and be able to fly around the country and go and watch all their games and not have to worry about work or anything else. So that was always the dream.
So how many more years before that happens?
5 more years. So
5 years to get the
I got to start working double.
PJ.
I got to start working double time if I want to get there.
5 more years to get the PJ.
I think I might be on a lease to own. I don't know.
I don't know. What about net jets or something?
I know it's going to have to be some type of
Jet
hybrid
ownership.
solution. That's right.
A lot of my friends have been flying PJ, and it's like they're like, "You're ruined. You're ruined."
You are ruined once you do it. I've done it once, and once you do it, you are ruined.
Yes, I haven't done it yet, but they told me you are ruined. Like you said,
Yeah.
you're ruined. Jimmy, this has been great. Thank you so much for being on Be the Solution. You certainly bring a lot of solutions to the table in the Philadelphia real estate and develop, and most importantly, to your family and those people that you care about. So I appreciate your time today. It's been a great episode with you, and I look to have you on again in the future and hear about where you are with some of the developments in the next, by the end of the year.
All right. Thanks so much.